Hey everyone, welcome back to the Promised Land podcast with me, Scott Saunders, talking all things Manchester United on the day after the transfer window has closed and the business or lack thereof that Manchester United has done has seemingly ticked off the entire fan base and the sentiment. We're never too far away from it being bad. United lose at home to Crystal Palace on Sunday, 2 shots on target. The attack looking bereft of ideas. And then you go into the final day of the window looking at a potential transfer target from Bayern Munich on loan. He ends up going to Tottenham Hotspur on loan with an option to buy that United looked for in the first place. And that's cause for concern. Look, I get it, guys. I absolutely understand it. It is bleak. Things are looking bleak at the moment, and it's really difficult to stomach sitting through same game after game after game of the same problems that United are facing, especially at home. It gets tiresome, and I'm tired of it as well. I've got to be honest. I would ultimately love everything to be at the click of a finger and a thumb, fixed and sorted out, but that's just not the situation nor the reality that Manchester United currently find themselves in. And I understand that there's a lot of frustration among the crowd at the moment. And I wanted to offer my 2 cents on the whole situation today. I'm sure if you've been following me on social media over the last few days, you might have picked up the kind of tone that I'm going to bring into this, maybe with less sarcasm. I do kind of offer that kind of sarcastic glint during my tweets sometimes and the stuff that I say on social media, but on the podcast, I do try and just keep it real, keep it never too high, never too low. That is the thing that I always say. That's the thing that Rob always used to say. And that is the legacy of this podcast and what I ultimately try and bring forward when I do recordings on audio and video. So that's what it'll be a lot of today. I'll try and explain the club side from my perspective on why I think United are, struggling or not jumping into deals or making decisions which will turn the season around straight away, but that's kind of how it is. We have a big injury blow to Lisandro Martinez, my favorite player at United, by the way. Absolutely gutting to see him go off in tears the other day. And to see him, I think he's done his ACL and MCL. So that is a long-term injury for him. And comes at a really bad time when United could probably really do with their best progressor of the ball in the back three that they have. Lisandro Martinez will not be there for the foreseeable future. And I've even seen some suggestions that maybe as United go into the summer where they try and remodel their team to fit Ruben Amorim's squad and system, does that mean his long-term future is in question as well? We'll wait and see. But look, yeah, that's what I want to offer today. I'll talk about Mathys Tel. I'll talk about the front three, the lack of options, or the options that are in that department. Marcus Rashford has officially left as well. The last episode I did was a reflection on whether it would be the right decision for him to go to Aston Villa. He has since gone to Aston Villa. That was confirmed on Sunday night, I believe, and that's the same day as United lose at home to Palace. So, yeah, weird few days, and the sentiment, as it always is at the moment, doesn't seem like we can ever escape it. The sentiment is down on the floor. However, will United fix this situation and get themselves out of it? Well, that's what I want to talk about on the podcast today, but you can subscribe to it on Spotify and Apple and YouTube. Please get in touch on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment with how you're feeling at the moment. And just do everything you can to support me on there if you would do so. Also, on Apple and Spotify, please subscribe on those audio platforms, plus any other audio platform you might use. You will probably find the Promised Land podcast on there if you just search for it. Give it a 5-star review, leave a comment as well, and give me a follow on social media, whichever one you use, or all of them if you haven't done so already, at @_Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And I'm on Blue Sky as well. The link is in the description of this episode in just down there. If you're looking... If you're watching the YouTube video, I'm pointing downwards, but it's also in the description, probably if you're listening on audio as well, in which case you can't see me pointing downwards. But difficult times at the moment, but let's get into it. Now, we're nearly 2 days removed from the Crystal Palace defeat, and it was the same thing that we've seen a few times before, wasn't it? So I'm not going to waste a ton of time really talking about what went wrong in that game, because I think we've seen the same issues just crop up time and time again. United tend to have this really difficult time at Old Trafford at the moment, especially against teams they're expected to beat. They can barely score goals. They are easy to break away against. They give up a lot of easy goals, and that's just the formula for it at the moment. And I can imagine Ruben Amorim is pretty frustrated that things aren't turning around, or the better results seem to be coming on the road at the moment. And look, I think Palace thoroughly deserved the win on the day. I don't know if you caught. There's probably a reason why this podcast is coming 2 days after that game, but I was in the TalkSport studio watching along with the team, and obviously then you kind of stayed to watch the Arsenal City game as well. And after a long day with United going down to yet another demoralizing defeat, I didn't really have the heart to come on and talk about what I'd seen earlier in the day, because I got home quite late. And obviously transfer deadline day then comes around, and we wait and see if United are going to do anything. And then it emerged like midway through the day that actually they weren't going to do anything, apart from a couple of outgoings. Tyrell Malacia, as I record this, isn't official to PSV, but I think that's going to happen at some point today before the Dutch transfer window closes. And I thought I'll give it another day, and I'll try and come with a level head and let the dust settle a little bit, because I know there's a lot of frustration. Look, at the end of the day, I'll talk through a couple of things around that Crystal Palace game. And look, I'm not completely absolving Ruben Amorim of blame. I know that maybe some people think that I think he's got a relatively free pass for the remainder of the season. And I do think that's the case to a degree. I understand that he's trying to experiment with ways that his team can, get the ball forward and use it a lot better and create more chances and look a bit more proficient in front of goal. He started Kobbie Mainoo through the middle as a number 9 with players around him. I think it was Ahmad and Garnacho, wasn't it? It didn't work out at all for me. I know he hit the post in the first 5 minutes, but that is about as good as it got for United. And I think what we've seen over the last week or two is Kobbie Mainoo playing in that left 10 role. I think we all saw him at Fulham, and then we all saw him in the Europa League as well, really making an impact in that role. And it was a surprise, I've got to say, to see Kobbie Mainoo starting in that role, especially with Joshua Zirkzee and Rasmus Højlund on the bench. It did not work out, and I think maybe some credit to him for trying, but at the same time, I don't really think that is the right way forward, and I'd be surprised if we saw it again, to be honest. But look, I think we're in an experimental time of the season now. We're United in the league. I believe they are 12th-ish. I'm just going to dig up that league table at the moment. 13th, fantastic. Crystal Palace have leapfrogged United in the league table. A point ahead, then United's next league game is against Tottenham away, so they could drop to 14th if they lose that, with Mathys Tel, no doubt, scoring a goal in a Tottenham win. That's kind of how we all feel at the moment, isn't it? But United are 12 points off the bottom 3, and I understand that, again, with another defeat coming along, there is a lot of United are being dragged into the relegation battle. I don't think it's that time to be concerned just yet, but this season, I will say, is going to just peter out into nothing in terms of the league. I think that is just something we're going to have to get used to, get to grips with. And that is now United 12 points behind 6th place, 12 points behind 5th place, and just not playing well enough or suggesting anything on the pitch to show that they're going to turn this around anytime soon. So I think I think they've been threatening this season for a long time, United. I think this has been coming for a hell of a long time. And I know they came 8th last season under Erik ten Hag and then won the FA Cup. But I think there are so many issues which need to be sorted out within this football club that I think the on-pitch reflections, as bad as it's been over the last few years, I think something drastic like this was always going to come before it ever was turned around properly. And I think this is just an era and a time that we're just going to have to look at and live through and just try and get through it until the club manage to dig themselves out of the hole that they're in. But it will take time. That is going to take a hell of a lot of time, as you know, and as you can see in the transfer market, the flexibility isn't really there at the moment to just do that straight away and do what a Man City did and spend 200 odd million in the January transfer window, because you have all that money from player sales and from the owners and this kind of thing. They're not on the same planet in those instances, and we can talk and we can moan about it. Man City's owners did this, or United's owners didn't do this. What can you change? What can you change? And yes, we can all talk about our frustrations and this kind of thing, but I think that there's just a danger that it feeds into this echo chamber of, yeah, this is the worst thing I've ever seen, and yeah, let's sort it out. When ultimately, there's not going to be a hell of a lot that on social media anyway. The social media noise that I see, I don't think it's going to be a lot that I ever see change because of that. I think the activity, if there's frustration, we've seen what this have done in the past. But look, I think all of the frustration is completely misdirected personally, and I don't think that the decisions that have been made in the transfer window, for example, are bad ones to kind of hold the club back. I think this is all preservation and an attempt to reverse the bad situation that United are in for the long term. This is a lack of short-term panic decisions or quick decisions made in order to preserve the long-term position and allow yourself some wiggle room a little bit later on. I'll talk about the transfer window in a little bit, but that's kind of where I'm going to go with that. So stick with me. Maybe you don't want to hear it, but that's just kind of where I'm coming from. I think, look, my point is that we're going to be in for a lot more of those Crystal Palace games. There are 14 games in the league left. I think we get to a point in each season where around this time, seems like this happens a lot over the last few years, end the season now. I've had enough of it. I'm done with it. There's still potentially an FA Cup run in this season. United have qualified for the last 16 of the Europa League as well. So, and they are still favourites for this competition, but they're not playing well enough to justify that at the moment, and not scoring enough goals to justify that at the moment. 28 goals scored in 24 games. That is really, really not good. But look, I think there's a lot of problems with United on the pitch at the moment. And my personal take is that I can see them all as well. I understand that they're all there, and it's really difficult to stomach. But at the same time, me shouting into the ether about this is what they should have done and this is what they shouldn't have done, and that was a bad decision, this is a good decision. I'm not going to kind of express that negative energy, because it'll just make me feel more negative. I'll kind of just revert into this, doomsday scenario. And I know it's pretty bad as it is, but for my own personal sanity and for my own personal enjoyment of football, I think if I get too kind of in the weeds about like how long term United are in a situation that they can never get out of, I don't think that's the case, by the way. But I know that's the case. That I know that's what a lot of people are feeling at the moment. I prefer to look at and understand the reasons why they're making the decisions that they're making, and try and look forward with some optimism even when it's really, really difficult to do so. So that is what I'll talk about after the break in a little bit. But yeah, just back to the Palace game. I mean, I've touched on Mainoo already. And look, I think if Ruben Amorim is going through the rest of this season and has what he has to work with, he doesn't have Leach and Martinez, obviously, and Patrick Dorgu's come in and he's been presented. Luke Shaw's getting back to fitness, and we'll see whether he's going to be integrated back into the first team, even for the Leicester game, which is coming up on Friday. I think what Ruben Amorim needs to do is shuffle his pieces around if he needs to. But at the same time, if he finds a piece that works, and this is where I'll criticize the decision that I think he made at the weekend, playing Kobbie Mainoo through the middle, just didn't work for me. If you see that Kobbie Mainoo plays in that left 10 and it works, why change it? Because I think we don't really know yet the exact role that Kobbie Mainoo is best in, and maybe there's some players who can play a variety of different roles, but that Kobbie Mainoo through the middle from the beginning was never really something that I think any of us thought would have worked. And I was a little bit puzzled by it. Maybe there was an underlying message in there with your two strikers on the bench the day before transfer deadline day that, hey, go get me a striker, guys. But that wasn't to be, and it wasn't the case. And like I say, I'll talk about the transfer window after the break around the 20-ish minute mark. But yeah, it's that day against Palace was not good all around. The Licha Martinez injury is devastating. I'm so sad for the guy with the fact that he's had knee injuries in the past, the fact that I think he did his metatarsal as well. And it just seems like every injury that Martinez or most United players seem to get at the moment are just long-term ones. And it's Mason Mount's case in particular. You know, he's been out for ages again, just from some kind of innocuous kind of knock in the Manchester derby. Whether that was muscular, I don't actually have that information to hand. But it's so sad to see Licha Martinez, who was just, of the players who were playing regularly in the team over the last few weeks, it just seemed like he was starting to find his footing, find his feet. And then, you know, I think that defending in the left channel, especially when he's quite high up, I think that was spotted as a potential weakness in his game when Amorim, or before Amorim joined, and, you know, over the first few weeks. And maybe there were times where we saw that. But I think in terms of being good on the ball and being good in, you know, distributing situations and coming forward as an extra attacker like these wide centre-backs need to be doing, and probably will be doing as the system progresses, I think he was really getting to grips with that. And it's such a shame to see somebody who epitomizes, I suppose, the tenacity that you want to see in a United player moving forward, especially at difficult times like this. It's difficult to see somebody like that, Licha Martinez, you know, get injured for the remainder of the season. He's not gonna come back this season, and we'll see whether it's 8 to 10 months or up to a year in some cases. That is particularly tragic, and I just wish him the speediest recovery possible. But it comes at a time where, you know, is there frustration and upset in him because of this is another long layoff, especially when it's such a crucial time in United's rebuilding process, that I think they're gonna. That I personally think that they held back in the transfer window in order to make sure that they get things right in the summer. And this is really the time where players need to make their impression and solidify their long-term place in the team. And I don't know whether is there a little bit of fear in him as well that maybe that was his opportunity and that's gone. And look, I'm not saying that I think that'll happen, but it could be the case. You know, United are going through a time where there's going to be cleaning out from top to bottom. They've just loaned out Marcus Rashford, for example. I don't think most of us would have ever thought that would happen. But, you know, that's the way that it is. There's no real room for sentiment at the moment. There's no real room for, you know, passengers or anything like that. And I'm not saying that he is that by any means, but what I'm saying is it's a critical time in United's future, and to sustain such a serious injury it's the worst timing possible. It's never good. It's never a good time to get injured, obviously. But yeah, I think everything compounding into like the awful season that United are having, how hard he's trying to make an impression and make an impact in the team. And with all the changes that could be coming over the next few months, it's really sad situation. I do hope he recovers as quickly as possible and gets back in the team. But yeah, I think in general, United are pretty toothless at the moment, and losing players is never a good thing. Luke Shaw should be on his way back, and I think I've seen that he could even be in the squad for the Leicester game. I think it's you can't really put any trust in it that Luke Shaw is going to be fit enough to step in and take over that place. But I think in terms of natural fits, I think Luke Shaw probably, if he can have his minutes managed and can keep himself fit for the next few months, then I think that is probably the best replacement in the squad that United do have. But again, I'm touching wood here, but you can't really rely on Luke Shaw's fitness for any sustained period of time. So look, we'll see. I hope he gets back in the frame pretty quick. I think maybe If you're looking for an additional option, left-footed option at left centre-back, you've got Lenny Yoro, Aidan Heavens joined, but that's way too much pressure to put on any new signing, especially at the age of 18, 19 years old, especially just after they've joined. But maybe Luke Shaw can step in there and plug the gap, because at least he does have some similar traits to what Martinez was offering, and maybe can carry the ball forward from that left centre-back role. But look, United have lost again. That is now 11 defeats this season in the Premier League, 28 goals scored in 24 games, like I say. And the answer was, on deadline day, go build an attack. But we did not see that happen. Mathys Tel joined Tottenham, and I'll be talking about that and the transfer deadline day shenanigans or lack thereof, and the decisions probably behind why United didn't go and get anyone on transfer deadline day. I'll talk about them in a second. So then, were you frustrated at United's lack of deadline day activity? I was. I've got to admit, I was, and I'm sure, well, I have seen that there's plenty of people who are frustrated at it, because Marcus Rashford obviously left the club, and he's gone to Aston Villa on loan with an option to buy, but has said in his interview with the club that this is only a short-term loan, so it doesn't seem like he's got any intention of really staying there beyond the end of this season. But I'm sure he is pretty concentrated on trying to show his best self in order to get a move, because I think that move abroad is one he wanted. He's staying at the house he's living in now to travel to Villa, so not as much of a change as maybe he would have been hoping for, staying in the Premier League and moving to a different club, which isn't too far away. But United have let Marcus Rashford go. He hadn't played for 13 matches after the Ruben Amorim fallout. Anthony has left the club as well and got player of the match in his first game for Betis at the weekend. Obviously, that means reflect and say, wow, I can't believe United ruined him again. And yeah, I think that's what United do to players. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the right decision was to keep him. And look, I think that's two options that have been put out the door. And the frustrating part of this is that with Mathys Tel, who he's a very talented player, 19-year-old from Bayern Munich. I would have advocated for United to go get him. I wanted to see United go get him. But the deal has to be right. And, optically, it doesn't look very good that he's gone to Tottenham on loan with an option to buy, does it? But I think the reasons behind why United didn't pursue that deal have come out, because of the loan fee, which was meant to be around £5 million. They just didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. And now United, this is the graphic that I've seen floating around social media. You might have seen this yourself if you're active on it. United now have 4 players for 3 positions in the attacking three positions in Rasmus Højlund, Joshua Zirkzee, Ahmad, and Alejandro Garnacho. And the 2 strikers are barely scoring any goals. Of course, that is a massive cause for concern. Ahmad is arguably better as a right wing back. Let me know if you think that he is or he isn't. And Garnacho's output at the moment isn't perfect either, or isn't great, but at least he's starting to get to grips with what Amorim wants, according to recent performances anyway. And on the plus side, Garnacho has stayed. I know there was a big sentiment and a big swell of don't you dare sell him. He's ended up staying in the end, and Marcus Rashford is the one who's ended up going. But look, you can look at it on paper. You can look at the squad on paper and just think that, yes, United are very, very short. Because they are, optically. And the options that are there and being rotated with in and out of these positions are not delivering. Like I say, United scored 28 goals in 24 games in the Premier League, and it is just not good enough. And how the hell do you fix that without bringing in a proven centre forward or a proven goal scorer? But we have seen Manchester United in the past bring in proven goal scorers and stunt them completely. It just because a new player was going to come in doesn't necessarily mean that that player would have come in and salvaged everything. I think United are looking at this situation and thinking, our financials are so tight at the moment that we need to be very careful and be very sure that this fits in with our long-term plan. I'm going to toe this line. If you don't like it, Apologies. You can get in touch with me on social media at _Scott Saunders or in the comment section if you would like to do so. But a kind of, as I said earlier, for my own kind of personal sanity, as well as just to look at things logically and try and understand what the decisions are that the club are making. If you're on the PSR line, the FFP line, and you have to go and pay up 5 million as a loan fee for a player that you don't actually know is going to move the needle, is that worth the risk? I personally don't think so. I think I would have loved to see Tel come in, but only on the right deal, on the right terms, and not even on a permanent deal. I would have advocated for that to be a loan with an option to buy, which is what I think United wanted, but the loan fee was just too high. And I think, there's some lack of clarity or around why United thought there was not an option to buy in it, or why United were told there was no option to buy in it, and Tottenham ended up getting one in the end. And look, maybe you can throw that at the negotiations team to say, why have you lost out there? Because at the end of the day, this is a talented player. But I think if you look at the table now and just look at United being 12 points above the drop zone, I understand that there's a lot of, oh my God, we're going to get relegated coming into this. There's a lot of that, definitely. But looking above United could go and win 10 of their next 14 games and ultimately not really finish any higher than 8th. That's just how bad the season's gone so far. So is this really the right time to make desperate or last-ditch decisions to go and try and salvage the season when the season is, in the league anyway, is probably already gone? For me, I don't think so. And jumping back to the point that I made earlier about, or the argument that's been going around about United being lacking numbers-wise in terms of the positions in the front three, I think that's a bit of complaining for the sake of complaining, personally. I just said 10 minutes ago on this podcast that I think we all looked at Mainoo when he played striker the other day and thought, well, Mainoo played really well at left 10 against Fulham when he came on and in the Europa League and scored a goal and got an assist in that game. So he's not included in those 10s. He's not included as one of the people in those positions. And ultimately, if I'm looking at the team at the moment, that's where I'd like to see Mainoo play in the left 10, because I think that is where he looks most effective. It's just about trying to find players who are the right fit for each role. You're never going to find them all, because I think United need a lot of players. But we're in such a downward spiral at the moment that I think it's just the thing to do to kind of point the finger of blame and say, this is irresponsibility at the highest degree. These guys don't know what they're doing. And if anything, I think it's the opposite. I really, really do. It's just, you can look at the situation that United are in at the moment and think of it as bleak, and see that the fact that they're not making decisions and actively going out and improving the team, and think that it's a negative. But you've got to look at the bigger picture. You've got to kind of look at the financials and look at the problems that United were to be in. Let's say they paid that 5 million fee from Mathys Tel on loan, and then he comes in and barely scores a goal like Rasmus Højlund does or has, and like the rest of the attackers. Who's to say that he's not going to... Who's to say he's going to come in and score 10 goals in the next 14 games in the league? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the problems with the team are much more structural than that. I think United have had problems scoring goals under Erik ten Hag for a while. And yes, I'm not saying that a centre forward is not a massive priority for this team, but there are other areas of the team which I think need to be improved on first. And like, just cycling back to the point I was making just now, Højlund, Xerxes, Garnacho, and Ahmad are not the only options for those three positions. You got Mainoo, you got Bruno Fernandes, you got Christian Eriksen, who can't play anywhere else but the two positions behind the striker. Seeing Eriksen in one of the two deep midfield roles, just isn't going to work for me. I don't think we're I think there's a reason why he's leaving in the summer, and there's a reason why Ruben Amorim isn't really favouring him all that much. But his brain and his ingenuity in those two advanced roles is probably more of a benefit than anything else, because he's not going to be able to sit and cover as much ground as like an Ugarte is or a Toby Collier is. So I think that's another 4 players there that I've named, I think, that can play in those 2 10 positions. Did I say Mason Mount? I can't remember, but Mason Mount's still in the squad as well. And look, he is ultimately injured all the time, but United are going to go and add another player into that financial mix while they pay Mason Mount a massive contract just to sit out because he's injured. It just doesn't make too much sense for me to do that unless you're absolutely entirely sure that this guy that you're signing is going to be a long-term part of the project. So I'm not saying that anybody can't be frustrated, because I'm frustrated as well, but I just try and look at the situation for what it is and just try and put trust in the direction that it's moving, because I think the people that are running the club at the moment are making unpopular decisions because they have needed to be made for a decade. And every year that has gone by where United have spent on a credit card, and every year that's gone by where United have spent irresponsibly, giving out contracts of 375k a week or 300k a week, and having multiple players in the squad on that wage, or signing Ronaldo when you didn't really need to, as much as fun as it was to see him come back, did you really need to? Decisions like that have set the club back for a long time financially, and in terms of a squad build. I think Ollie Solskjaer himself would have told you that. I think he has said this as well, that look, he would have wanted Ronaldo, but in terms of the plan that he was and the team that he was building at the time, it didn't make sense to bring in a player like that who didn't press from the front like he wanted. So there's lots of frustration. I'm frustrated as well. I absolutely am. But I think we just have to look at the situation for what it is and understand that short-term pain for the benefit of long-term gain is the best route forward. And if you're not able to sign a striker on or in January who is the absolute perfect striker for you moving forward, or is coming in on a deal which you think is massive value that you can fit in to your PSR tracking for the rest of the season, probably not worth the risk. Ultimately, I look at the problems that the team are having at the moment, and I think progressing the ball from the back to the front and turning the defensive side of the team to an attacking side of the team, that is, and progressing the ball up the pitch and making chances, is probably limiting everybody. So you can look at Rasmus Højlund's lack of a good first touch and how Xerxes not really done a ton to settle in, or how the 1 or 2 chances they seem to get a goal scoring connection on a pass or something like that, when they don't come off. United aren't creating enough chances in the first place. And I think I look at the team that they have at the moment, I think the wing backs are the biggest problem, personally. I actually do. And United have gone out and they have addressed the left side left wing back, with Patrick Dorgu signing, was presented to the crowd at Old Trafford before the Palace game the other day. And I think that is an example of a deal that they thought that they could do, of a player that has the characteristics that can fit into the team long term. I know they'll have to work with him, but he is the kind of player that could, if he fits into the system and learns it, could actually make a difference as United try and progress from a back 5 to a front 5, because those wing backs are so imperative to how Ruben Amorim's teams play. They've got to have a lot of energy. They've got to be able to carry the ball. They've got to be able to get up and down. And I think in Dorgu, that is what he will be able to offer. He might have to be integrated slowly into the team, but I'd like to see him, come in and try and make a difference straight away. It's a lot to ask of a young player like that. And I'm not saying that the question might be there. He might not even be good enough yet, but I think United have 6 months or so to test him out and see if he can progress and be that first choice left wing back moving forward, or if that is another position that they will need to double up on in the summer and get somebody more experienced. There's a lot of positions which need to be addressed. But as much as the strikers are a problem, there's the problems in the midfield as well. The creative elements are so stymied and stifled at the moment. But I think United's biggest problem is actually getting the ball up the pitch and creating chances enough and holding the width, because we've all seen Diogo Dalot on the left side and Nusair Mazraoui on the right side. They don't seem to have the characteristics or the ability or the mentality or the attacking instincts to contribute effectively in the final third. And if they do, it's quite irregular. So, look, I hope I'm kind of making a bit of sense here, but this is kind of where I'm coming from. And I think before I go, maybe it's just, I see a lot of, oh, here comes the spin again. You know, United have put a number of stories out and justifications as to why they haven't signed anyone on deadline day, and have said that United are concerned about their PSR position and want to try and create as much wiggle room for the summer as possible. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. I see there's so much frustration in the fan base, and I understand that it's completely legitimate, and I get it. It is a really difficult time, as difficult and as bad a season as I've ever seen United have. But things are just dismissed quite quickly as, you don't know what you're doing. This is just spin. Go and sign a Man City went and signed a 60 million-ish DM on deadline day. Why can't you go do it? The situations are very, very different. Very different. And then the riposte is, well, Qatar wouldn't have let this happen. That bid was never real. They couldn't even prove that they had the funds. And if they'd have wanted, like, actively to go and take over this football club, they would have, because the money apparently would have been there. It can't really scream that there's no value in the deal if you come in and it just doesn't make any sense to kind of hold that against the ownership team that are in charge at the moment. What they are doing is making unpopular and difficult decisions in order to preserve the long-term profitability and sustainability and success of the football club. And it's just, not everything's going to be turned around in an instant. And that is just something that I have had to come to terms with. And I think most people have had to come to terms with as well. I'm not saying that there's not reasons to be frustrated, but I just think that things have been mismanaged to the point where it is that bleak at the moment. And it's going to require some digging in of the heels and some patience. And when I say patience, I mean years of patience. They've outlined that they want to try and get back to winning the Premier League by 2028. That's 3 years away. It's not going to be done in an instant. Their first port of call is to cut the wage bill, make United profitable, clear all the dangers that they've had with PSR, each financial year that goes by, and then try and reinvest. And I don't have any doubt that they'll reinvest in the summer. If you're looking at already, if you do end up selling Marcus Rashford, for example, that's 40 million on the books. If he joins Villa, maybe if he does really well, United can sell him for more. There's guaranteed money coming in on Jadon Sancho because of the obligation with Chelsea. Anthony will end up leaving. You've got Christian Eriksen and Victor Lindelof, whose wages will clear off. They're over 100k each. And there's a ton of others as well. Maybe they cut their losses on some signings that have, or try and make the money back on some signings that haven't worked out. And that's completely viable and completely possible as well. But I think there's maybe some accusations that they've hung Ruben Amorim out to dry. And I understand that is definitely a thing, but I think Ruben Amorim's always been pretty clear that he knew the restraints that he was having joining United. And that is a decision that he made to join, because the offer was now or never. At the end of the day, if you look at it this way, Ruben Amorim has got 6 months or so to work with, understand which players he thinks he can work with and move forward that way. And he wouldn't have had that 6 months. If United had got a temporary manager in for the rest of the season and appointed Amorim at the start of next season, like he wanted, then he would have been working out which players he could and couldn't use in the system next year. So you're just kicking the can down the road a little bit. So it needs to be joined up thinking, it needs to be a joined up process. And I'm sure Amorim's probably frustrated, but at the same time, it just requires a bit of patience from everybody. And I'm not going to try and go in these downward spirals. I just don't think it's very productive to do that. So that's kind of my take on it. And I'm trying to be the never too high, never too low kind of guy. So when it looks, let's say if United are in 3 years' time manage to turn things around, I'll probably be here saying it's not as bad, it's not as good as you think it is. So just chill out and calm down a little bit. So I'm trying to, toe the line in the middle. But that's kind of how I'm thinking at the moment. Look, you can disagree with me, but I hope that some of the things I've said have kind of resonated and made a bit of sense. If you disagree or if you agree, please get in the comments underneath this YouTube video or in the comments underneath the audio file on Spotify or Apple. Please subscribe to the channel on whichever audio platform you like, or on YouTube. Or if you could do me a favor on all three, on everything that you can, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, like I say, and get in touch with me on social media as well at @_Scott Saunders on X, Instagram, and TikTok. And I'll be back in the next few days to talk a little bit more about Manchester United and whatever is happening at the time. Difficult at the moment, isn't it? But I think that's just the way it is. I mean, a bit of patience is required from everybody. Until next time, I've been Scott Saunders. This has been the Promised Land Podcast. See you soon.